Buongiorno, benvenuti a tutti.
Good morning and welcome to everyone on this event on restorative justice.
Un pubblico numeroso.
I see many people here in the audience, despite the fact that this topic might just aim at experts and people working in law. So many people in the audience, and that shows that the experience of justice and injustice is something true, is something happening, and it is a part and parcel of our daily life. This is not something just happening in trials and among lawyers. We want justice. We want justice be made. Justice has been made. Let's promise justice. These are often words that we can find in the media after attacks, accidents, episodes of violence, and many events leading to the idea that there is injustice. What is it making justice or obtaining justice for a person who has suffered from a serious human, material, or any other type of loss? Justice made in courts and justice in contemporary liberal democracies is the result of a long-term civilization, which has created some principles that we will be discussing and that we want to keep and continue to implement. That has not always been the case. Ancient civilizations that our Western civilization is based on have shown in their myths a turning point which has led to a momentous change from a primitive idea of justice to more reasonable forms of justice and assessment through the assessment given by third parties that follows specific procedures. Let's see an example of a turning point from ancient civilization to modern civilization. The third tragedy of Aeschilo shows the creation of humanids with the intervention of Athena, the goddess of reason, intervening to break and stop violence against Agamemnon and his family. The court says that Athena is still guilty of having killed her children. So the primitive concept of justice, as in the idea of betraying crime, belongs to the past stage. That was the idea of classical civilizations. Today, we've gone beyond that. The texts of contemporary constitutions, including the Italian one, which is very rich in principles, and as well as international documents, foresee a whole set of principles where justice is made upon procedures. Everyone has access to courts and judges in order to solve disputes. Independence of judges is guaranteed. There is a specific trial rules and respect for the parties. Principle of justice, penalty proportionality, and the idea of giving a penalty to redeem the people is an idea that still applies. So there are a lot of documents on justice, but even in this context, even in justice, even if everything is done properly, even if justice is prompt and reasonable, even in this context, there's something wrong. There are still gaps. Last year, we had at the meeting the experiences of Maria Grazia Grena and Agnese Moro. They talked about one of the most incredible legal, political, and human tragedies ever happened in Italy. That extraordinary event and friendship, and that was witnessed by the fact that they embraced here on the stage, was led to the idea of Adolfo Ceretti, Mazzucato, that wrote something in the book of the meeting. And I quote, "Everything was born out of the idea that it was not enough to meet the demands of justice. It was not enough that the culprits could stay in jail for years. To the victims or to their relatives, it was not enough that the people would stay in jail." Agnese Moro said, we needed to break the evil chain that were used to call justice. So that sense of insatisfaction, that sense of failure led to new forms of traditional justice. Why did we need something new? Let's make one more step forward. Let's go into details. The greatest problem of traditional justice, as observed by Paul Ricoeur, is that even the most civilized operations of justice, especially in criminal justice, still show are still focused on violence. Now, making reference to the myth I mentioned before of the Eumenids, in the end, in that tragedy, the Eumenids do not replace the Rimini. They overcome them, but after a long dialogue based on persuasion, Athena gives them a place in the city. They're not exiled. They're not sent away. There's a transformation in these old goddesses. Athena, the goddess of reason, convinces them to re-guide their force to a form of blessing for the city. Those evil energies focusing on revenge turn into positive energies. They are included, but that gives a warning. In contemporary civilizations, the expression of justice is deeply connected to the expression of force. This force is necessary for constitutional needs, which are necessary in social coexistence, as in ensuring order and coexistence is a task incumbent upon the state, as well as preventing crimes and sanctioning and providing penalties to the culprits. However, this law borrows something from the violence, as I said by Host Francois. Hence a paradox. Violence must be fought, but actually force is still used. Hence, we need to find something new. We need to make a step forward in justice. We need to test new forms of justice, meeting the needs for justice, which is always there to stay. Even us, lawyers and experts, must focus on the title of the meeting. All that we have bequeathed, we have to earn it in order to possess it. This is something that was already debated last year. This is the result of new experiences. This year, we continue to discover, to find out new forms of justice, integrating, complementing traditional forms of justice with the contribution of new people. This morning, we have with us Mrs. Carmen Velasco. Let's give a round of applause to her. She's a Spanish lawyer, notary public, who's been working since 2002 in Bilbao, in the Basque countries. And she, as she will tell us, after some historic events affecting Spain during the financial and economic crisis, she specialized on conflict resolution, especially through mediation and other alternative methods of dispute resolution. She's focusing on family law and criminal law. So she works on mediation, and she's now a master for many new professionals. She spends a lot of energy to train people working in this field. And she works in close collaboration with the courts of Madrid and the Basque countries. We then have with us Father Francesco Occhetta, who has already participated in the meeting. He is a Jesuit. He writes for the journal Civiltà Cattolica and is very qualified, as we can understand from his many articles. He has a degree in law at the State University of Milan. She has also studied theology in the University of Madrid, and he has a PhD that he got at the Università Pontificia in Rome. He is specialized in human rights at the University of Padua, and then he went to study in Santiago del Chile. He's a journalist, and he wrote many books on the topics I'm also dealing with related to constitutional law. The latest book is entitled Giustizia Capovolta, Justice the Other Way Round. Then we will have with us Mr. Valdeci Antònio Ferreira, that the meeting knows very well. Last year, He talked about the extraordinary experience of APAC. It is very difficult to give a description of Valdeci Antònio Ferreira, but let me tell you that he is an expert and theologian, lawyer, and he has promoted this wonderful initiative that he's going to be talking about, APAC. And just like Carmen, he works in close collaboration with Brazilian institutions, especially the state of Minas Gerais. And he deals with the training of professionals that will participate in his initiative, and he will be focusing on that. I've already been talking too much, and now I'm going to give the floor to Carmen Velasco. Please.
Buongiorno a tutti. Mi scuso per non riuscire a fare.
So good morning, everyone. I would like to apologize for not being able to make my speech in Italian. I would like, first of all, to thank Marta for having invited me in participating in this event. I'm very glad to be here. For a number of years, I've been dealing with alternative dispute resolution, and in particular with mediation. As Marta has already said, mediation is a new way of solving disputes, and it brings about new solutions. Today, I'm going to talk about a number of cases which deal with the ordinary life of people, and I refer to people who, for example, stopped paying the installments of their mortgage, or, for example, couples who are going through a crisis and who are thinking about divorcing, separating. In Spain, lots of families, lots of people have faced difficulties and stopped paying the installments of their mortgage to buy their property. In some cases, banks proposed the postponement of payment or new refinancing solutions to them, but some of these cases have not been solved. Lots of these cases have taken place up to the extent that a real social case could be identified. And as a matter of fact, the municipality of Madrid invited us to work as mediators to propose new forms of ADR to find out new solutions. This is a very urgent social situation. And as I said, we were invited by the municipality of Madrid. And against this background, we had also the involvement of banks. Banks were convinced of the fact that it was necessary to be involved in technical meetings. Individual meetings were held with these people, with these families, and also additional meetings were held with bank representatives. During the meetings with the debtors, we had to gather data that could then be useful to carry out an objective evaluation of the data. For example, to know exactly how high was the residual debt, or the number of years had passed ever since the first installment was paid, the type of expenses borne by the families, a number of information that was needed in order to address these people and, in other way, create, so to say, the good faith of the person in front of me. My task was to support them with data, supporting this good faith vis-à-vis the representatives of the banks. In other words, my task was to create the conditions in which the bank could renegotiate the mortgage with the debtor, maybe using additional external professionals like mediators. So we worked on the basis of these guidelines. I've always worked with a colleague of mine, so there were always two of us, two mediators, meeting these people in difficulties. And when I started talking to these people, I find out that a whole new world opened up, a completely different world than the one that I thought about, a very complex one. And so I realized that this would have required, on my part, a very intensive work. In all of these cases, I had to meet people who had to face unexpected situations, who had committed results, but most of the times they were not responsible of their bad situation. They were not aware of the norms concerning the mortgage contract. So people who incidentally found themselves in a very difficult, unexpected situation. I'm talking about people who, for example, had bought property and did not adequately foresee what the amount of the monthly installment was to be compared to their income. Or I was also to face situations in which, for example, I was facing a couple that was about to divorce, or parents who had to give a guarantee for their children in order for them to buy a house, or another situation, migrants working in the construction sector and who lost their work and were no longer able to buy the installments of their mortgage. And the situation was for these people unsustainable, because they found themselves unemployed and were no longer able to pay for their mortgage. So all of these people applied to us with very negative prospects, and sometimes on the part of the banks, I heard that we were dealing with people who did not want to pay. But then when we started working all together, the technical questions were not enough to face this situation. And so I realized that this was a real challenge. I was facing a real challenge. I could not only pose myself technical questions, I was struck deep in the heart of mine. I could not address the person facing me simply thinking about economic information and simply providing an objective evaluation, because this would make me a sad person, also a sad professional. I had the idea that I could, in a way, diminish the value of myself and also of the person facing me. Any technical data would not have been enough. Any technical professional could have done that technical evaluation, but that was an uncomfortable situation. So I wanted to develop a new attitude towards this situation. So the conversation with all of these people was something that could, in a way, change myself as well. So I changed the way I worked. I started asking personal information, asking personal questions to these people, asking also for what they thought possible solutions could be. I tried to establish a personal relationship and not only a professional one. I therefore discovered that the relationship was more fulfilling for me, more complete, and I was no longer, in a way, constrained in my objective role of mediator. The more time I spent with these people, the more they talked about their personal situations, the more I realized that I was, in a way, facing a different person. I was dealing with a story, with a personal story. I knew everything that happened in the lives of these people. I knew that each of these people actually had a family behind themselves, and as a professional I could have never understood these things. This was really powerful. During these conversations, these people found themselves actually communicating with me, and gradually they discovered trust and confidence in themselves. They discovered themselves as people, and this made me really fulfilled and happy. Not so much because of the fact that there was an alternative way of solving their litigation, their legal case, but what made me happy was the fact that these people could perceive themselves as having a real value, that they could exist, and this was really impressive for me. When the conversations were over, at the end of each conversation, I understood that these people had more confidence in themselves. Even if they had not solved anything in that specific moment, but they realized that a solution would come. This also made me possible to go to the representatives of banks, to talk about the stories of these people, to look for and find alternative solutions. So, for example, for people who had lost their jobs, we provided for them to find new jobs. We applied to a number of associations that could help debtors, for example, from the point of view of getting food supplies, without feeling neglected or in a way diminished in their value. I worked with a number of colleagues And some of these colleagues also experienced this attitude in a new way. Some of them expressly told me that it was the first time for them to work in this way. And that was the moment when I realized that I was doing something more. Another very important moment was that when I met representatives of the banks, my position, my stance in addressing the bank was a completely new one. We managed to find out new solutions to settle the debts. For example, we provided for gradual installments to be paid by the banks with payment commitments that were not mandatory. For example, the bank could retain a small amount of money. So a lot of different, various alternative solutions were identified, with the people being able to remain in their property, paying low rents. So we had a number of different solutions in different situations. Up until we managed to reduce the problem of missed payments, missed reimbursements of the installments to the minimum. This was the very first time in which a municipality was capable of finding solutions with banks. And then there's another example I'd like to make, referring the work we did with couples who were about to separate. I was once called by a colleague of mine. She had received a telephone call from a couple, and she had realized that she was not able to help them from a legal point of view. She was not able of, in a way, bringing away the pain from this couple, and asked for my contribution. When I first met these people, I realized that I was dealing with a situation that could not be handled only providing these people with suggestions. So I basically addressed this couple, trying to understand what kind of implications, what kind of involvement I was asked, and what contribution I could give. So I entered the room without knowing anything else, simply with myself, trying to explain to these people what kind of work I would do, telling them that I was not going to be the one telling them what to do. I just wanted them to tell me what was going on between them and what the most important things were between them, how they were experiencing the situation. And I had them understand that I was close to them. So in a way, I favored communication between the two. And they gradually told me, for example, that he was suffering from a degenerative illness, and that there had always been difficulties between the two. And then due to the illness, everything was becoming very, very difficult, much more difficult. They no longer had the strength of, in a way, bearing with one another. And then talking to them, I realized that I could keep calm. So I was very natural. I had a very natural attitude. I was close to them and could follow the conversation. I would pose a very simple question. I did not pose the question. It was simply the couple who would tell me that they were no longer communicating, and that living together during the day was a very heavy burden for them. This is not what they wanted. And then through my questions, for example, I found out how they wanted to live their day, and I tried to help them highlight their wish, their desire of feeling loved once again. They would make sentences in a very slow way. They were kind of afraid of exposing themselves too much before me, but they started listening to one another. For example, especially the woman would tell me that she would get nervous with her husband, that she would scream at her husband, and then as soon as she started screaming, she would realize that she was making a mistake. So I basically asked what she could do in this situation for herself and for her husband. She answered, actually, I don't want to scream, I don't want to do it with my husband, but then when I realized that I've done that, it's too late. And then she realized that she would hurt him and also feel bad after this situation. And both of them would talk about forgiveness. This impressed me a lot. When I first entered the room, I had realized that they were unable to communicate, but the more frequently we met, they both realized that they were people, that they would actually express these concepts, that they were able of communicating and forgiving. And then this couple eventually decided that they did not want to separate any longer. And after some time, she would call my colleague and ask to talk to me once again, because she wanted to, in a way, recover the words that were pronounced on that given day. She wanted to note them down, to remember them and pronounce them when necessary. After leaving the room, I was changed, and they too were changed. And my colleague asked what happened. This was a really powerful experience. I'm still thinking about that because I still have to understand, grasp it. And then there was one last case I would like to share with you. That was the case of a couple that was about to divorce. They have children, and they're very worried about the fact that their children might not accept this separation. They're not able of being by themselves and communicating. When they started talking to me, I saw that this story has been going on for years. For example, the woman does no longer remember what the two have done together as a couple, or what has happened with their children. They're sort of blocked. So what surprises me is that these people come to me with their limitations, and the way they use to narrate themselves, to tell about their stories, is really unique. And as a mediator, when I start working with these people, I also realize that the situation changes. The three of us started talking, and the tensions between the couple have been, so to say, exposed. And I realized that these people really needed someone being with them, supporting them, and helping them talk. So during these sessions, which sometimes lasted 5 hours, very tiring from a psychological point of view, well, in these moments, time and space disappear. I do not realize. It is as if I were so involved in these situations that I no longer perceive that time and space disappear. I ask them what they would like to have, what they can do to recover their relationship, and I realize that these people also want to be happy. And when this desire for happiness emerges, well, then it's really thrilling and emotional to be with them in the room. I don't know what the people really are going through, but I'm sure of the fact that this new journey is very important, because through the law, I have the chance of helping these people to try and identify what's still good and what's still there between the couple. So these people use reason, start using reason in a new way. They are being more realistic. They understand what's not going on. They understand the consequences of this crisis, what kind of consequences this has on their children. But it's not me who's giving them advice. It's the couple who gradually understand some aspects emerge. What I do is basically helping them use their creativity to find out, to identify solutions, because they start communicating again. At the beginning, everything appears as an obstacle, but then, as soon as they start talking, instead of only talking about their separation, divorce agreement, or thinking about, for example, the kind of alimony that they can give to the children, that's a way of talking about real facts. And so I have the chance of helping them, taking on their responsibility and taking a step at a time. And sometimes couples have their own ideas, and there are cases in which my mediation is not enough. But I'm full of hope thanks to my work, and what I would like to communicate to you is really hope. We're not always in the situation of solving situations. Each case is a separate case, but none of the cases I've supported was enough basically to annihilate the person. So the passion that I live whenever I am with these people is something that I would like to continue witnessing, meeting the other. Even if we're talking about legal issues, enables us to carry out a very discreet kind of work. You can open up whole new forms of support and life in people who thought that they were alone up to that moment. This is a new discovery for me. This really a true enrichment for the legal system. As a legal expert, actually, sometimes wonder what are my limitations. But actually, through mediation, all legal experts, all legal professionals can communicate. They can communicate with lawyers, with public institutions, with the government, with the banks. And I think this can be a right compromise between traditional justice and other solutions. This can help us go more into the details of any situation. And this gives us the chance of supporting people to establish new forms of relations involving all stakeholders. Thank you very much.
Grazie Carmen per aver...
Thank you very much, Carmen, for sharing with us your experience. So you have not abandoned your original job as a notary public, but you are just complementing it with something new, with a new job. I'm going to just underline a few words and a few aspects I've been struck by during the speech. First of all, I think that we have all thought that we also have the same problems, the economic difficulties, lost jobs, all the concerns and worries for many families over these years that they don't know what's going to happen with their house in the future. A lot of family tensions. Carmen talked about conflicts characterized by impatience. In the modern world, many families are now living such tensions. So the restorative justice that Carmen mentioned has not just to do with big historical conflicts, but it has to do with daily life, and this is something we're all living. Carmen has been very realistic. In many cases, she said that there is no conflict resolution, but the result that we get is a result where there's just the winners. There's no winners and losers. As the American would put it, it is a win-win approach, as where everybody is winning. And what is the driving force of all this? It's not the right advice. She said, I'm not there to provide advice, to give advice. But what is important is her approach because she was able to see the person's value. Just imagine the shame of a person who can no longer to pay the installment of the mortgage, and the shame that she has in speaking about that with the lawyer. In human terms, these people have to pay a high price when they have to say, well, I can no longer pay for my children, I can no longer pay for the house. Think about the shame that they may have, for example, people when they have their husband or wife who is ill, but they can no longer talk. So she did not give advice. She used a human approach in order to overcome that human misery, that human shame. And she was able to see the person's value, who then can be born again and alone can find again new ways to continue. The legal tradition of our fathers talk about human dignity. In all the texts of the second post-World War period, there is the idea of human dignity. But what is the root of human dignity in the cultural and anthropological and religious tradition that we have, a tradition that has been lasting for thousands of years? First of all, thank you very much for inviting me here. Thank you very much to President Emilia, Professor Vittadini, and thank you very much to Marta Cartabia, Vice President of our Constitutional Court, because she was brave enough to talk about this topic, and she was able to see very far away. This model focuses on the depth of our life. We all are people who are either positive or negative against people who have committed crimes. I came here to talk about this model, which needs a community like yours in order to promote it for two reasons. First, I was working in jails for many years, not just in Milan. Every Sunday I used to go to the jail in Milan. And I also went to Chile and Colombia, where I can tell you that the conditions of convicts are much, much worse than the ones we have in Italy. They live under very, very difficult conditions. The second reason why I'm here is that I have met many victims of crimes, and they said that this is the only possible model. After suffering so much, we now have the opportunity to express our pain, because even the money given by the state cannot justify our pain. So this model is mostly based on the victims and their pain. They either they are instrumentalized from a political point of view, or they cannot be heard, because our society considers jails as social dumping sites. I'll just give you some figures to let you understand the situation. In Italy, we have 195 jails. At the end of 2017, there were more than 56,000 prisoners, convicts. Last year, there were 54,000. The maximum capacity of jails is 50,000 people, so 6,000 people more in jails. They shouldn't be there. Out of 56,000, 19,000 are migrants. But 69% of convicts have made a crime for the second time. So out of the 1,000 people that enter and get out of jail every day, 690 make the crime again, make crimes again. So this is a model that is not working, basically. And we are responsible for that. We have to say something. We have to act. I give you some more numbers. If the second crime decreased by 1%, the Italian state would save millions of euros. As in, this model is not working, and that could also convince those who think that all people should be put in jail if they make crimes. There's 23,000 people who have made relapses, and things are not working. 9,000 people out of 54,000 are in jail, and they still wait for judgment, for decisions. Justice time is too much, is too long in courts. And when I was invited by a radio, I was hearing a phone call by a convict who had been in jail for 2.5 years, and then he was freed from jail because nothing has happened, because he hadn't done anything. So what is for us restorative justice? Justice can be interpreted in different ways, and it depends on the interpretation depends on the periods, on eras. So we have a certain type of justice based on two principles: proportionality of the penalty and the certainty of penalty. But this model is not focusing on the person, because the questions are, what are the laws that have been infringed? What penalty should we give? And then there's another type of question. Then there is another model of justice where people have to be retrained in their behavior. And then there's a complementary model, because we already have that model in the criminal law for the minors, as in restorative justice, which is a cultural product, first of all, integrating the classical models of justice and the victim's pain. The penalty is set by answering three questions. Who is suffering? What type of suffering is it? And who needs to be treated? So here, human dignity is at the heart of this model. And restorative justice is divided into 5 steps. First, acknowledgement by the culprit of its own responsibility before the victim. And I will explain you how this is made. But this is just the first step. Otherwise, culprits continue to justify themselves for what they have done. Second step, meeting the victim. So the culprit has to meet the victim, and I understood that in the jail in Milan. This meeting is very powerful because culprits used to tell me, okay, I will be much more human and I will leave my jail in a different way after meeting the victim. And then society's intervention with the mediator, through the mediator. Since 1999, Europe has been recommending to introduce this model. Italy is slowly doing that. There is a bill on that. Mediators are foreseen as professional profiles, but there's no mediation culture. There are no schools training mediators that can use this model. This must be integrated into a system, and that is not the case yet. That does not exist. Fourth step, the victim has to understand its own pain. They have to ask, why have you done this to me? And sometimes people say, those monsters are totally different. Some people say, to me, forgiving does not mean forgetting the past, but starting once again in a different way. And then the fifth step, identifying penalty, which can be remediation. For example, I get out of the church, I'm going by bicycle, for somebody is destroying my bicycle. I have to understand why they are doing it, because they need money, because they want to hurt me, because they didn't feel well. If I understand the reasons why they do that, then and I can justify my pain. If I don't understand that, and I keep my pain inside me, at some point, pain is going to block me in my life, and I'm going to be afraid of everything, because we cannot meet the other who can let me understand why they've done that. So it is necessary to ask for a remediation, like money, or some other type of compensation. Clearly, there's not just money. This model already exists in Europe and in the United States. We should help the state to create it as a whole system. Also, they have in the US they have an alternative model. In the UK, there is a face-to-face program. In Germany, with reference to minors, there is a restorative justice. France has social mediators. In the Netherlands, this model is foreseen and is implemented by the police even for sexual crimes. And we've heard the case for Spain. However, this model is extraordinary because it is based on the Bible. It is a biblical model. This is what God was asking his people when the people was betraying him, and all the New Testament books open up with this form of justice where God tells the people, why have you betrayed me? And what does the people have to do? They have to quest for the truth. So the experience has to be interpreted by casting truth on it. And we need to understand how true it is. And to me, that this is fundamental. So, according to the Bible, this model does not just apply to priests or nuns or religious people. This is a very hard model. This is the model which is often applied to brothers who kill each other. Let's think about Cain and Abel. Let's think about Ismail and Isaac. Think about Joseph and his brothers. Think about Joseph and his brothers. When his brothers went to him, he was the vice emperor of Egypt. He didn't say, okay, dear brothers, what did you do? He asked for the truth. He had them go back. Go and read these pages. It's wonderful pages of the Bible. So thanks to Israel and the realism of Israel, this model was used for governing the relations between countries and nations in order to establish alliances and mutual acknowledgement, because we are the children of a gift. Somebody used to tell me, Father, when I used to confess, you can forgive me, but I'm not going to forgive myself. And the Father used to say, but God is forgiving you. We are the children of a gift, so we should welcome this gift. So the Bible says that this model is based on four big principles, and I'm not going to go into details. First, do not judge, but educate the culprit. Cain, the murderer, is not abandoned to himself, is not destroyed by God, is not excluded. He is doing justice and rescue at the same time. Tzedakah does not get revenge out of the culprit, but he asks the culprit to do a journey of truth. He is expelled by heaven in order to reach the truth. So treating is important. In order to receive God's gift, man has to realize about the evil he has done. But how can man realize of the evil he has done, of the crime he has done, even from a spiritual perspective? We can understand the good and the evil that we do. This is a starting point. Then I will tell you in the end what has happened in a jail in India, that from 10,000 convicts, they started meditation and relapses decreased to 7%. The second principle in the Bible is the society's responsibility. Victims have to be given back everything they have been losing. There are two possibilities for that. Either the culprits take on their own responsibility by giving a compensation for damage, or the whole society has to provide compensation to victims, because it is objective responsibility. Why? And this is the third principle. We, as a society, are responsible for treating people, for saving the land which has been damaged by blood. So land has to be restored. And the fourth principle, in the evil, in the crime, there is already our condemnation. The problem is to provide measures where people can understand what they have done, when people can reach the truth before God. Because God is more merciful to us than we are to ourselves. We just to be careful that the other is not going to die in society. The 19th century had God die, but if we're going to die the others, we can no longer understand who is suffering. And that doesn't work. Penalty transforms blame into responsibility, and therefore there's God's intervention. God gives us more hope. To conclude, I'm not going to talk about Brazil because we're going to hear about it later. And I'm going to tell you this because this experience is going to teach us something. In India, in 1995, there was somebody working in jail in New Delhi. This lady was working in this jail. She had 10,000 culprits, and she had convicts. She was desperate because there was a high rate of relapse. She was going around the jail, and she let himself be seen by convicts as a person. When people look at somebody's face, everything is different. Then she put a big box where convicts could write, and she was giving an answer to them all. And then she identified rooms, silent rooms, where everyone could meditate in the rooms, Vipassana meditation. So the people lived a week in silence, and silence is important for our life, for our nature. You can understand who you are with silence. And these people were just understanding what they had done, in good and in the good and in the bad. And when people understand that, and if we and our society could understand this, we would change radically. This person stayed there for 2 years. Then this model was exported. So my question is, if Vipassana meditation worked for India, in Italy, what could we do in order to understand and to be aware? Even sports, as some people say, resilience, sacrifice could help us. Or meditation. I talked about that to the magistracy. And there are some departments which are very open on this. But the problem is that today, some things, these things do not apply. Everybody in the 1980s was dreaming about this model. All of the people who were working with me and were studying with me at the university were dreaming about this model. But what are they now? Because not many people do believe in this model now. That's because we look at law in a different way. Law means making people meet. This is law. We don't have to increase conflicts through law. We don't have to increase the social tension. In Nisida, there were parents who had their children killed, and they went to see the people who had killed them, because they said they are the product of a system, Camorra, the Italian mafia. And they got healthier, they got treated, them and the culprits. The vice president of Libera, she had her father killed under her own eyes. After many years, she said, this is the only model we have. We have to promote it. I've written this short book. Professor Fleed gave me an article that I was struck by. He's a great master for me. And he said in this article, I was the Minister of Justice. I was the President of the Constitutional Court. But just later on, I understood the importance of this model. And I am here in order to say, let's promote it all together. So there was a father from Austria who once wrote a great book on restorative justice. That was Visnet in the 1980s. And he dedicated this book to a young boy, 19 years old. His name was Hans. When he came back from jail, after 3 years of jail, his village denied any type of reconciliation. So he hanged himself out of desperation after 6 weeks. In his farewell letter, he wrote, because men never forgive. This should not be the case for us. That should never be the case for us. Thank you.
Gli spunti di questo
This contribution has given us plenty of food for thought, ranging from biblical culture to Indian experiences, to the Italian Association Libera, to our greatest brains in criminal and constitutional right. And this couldn't but have been the case because of the experience of Father Occhetta. Allow me a couple of remarks. We are not facing an alternative between those who are for permission and those who are for justice in any case. So we are not here to decide whether we are more in line who wish more punishment vis-a-vis the ones, those who commit crimes, opposed to those who are more generous in a way. We're talking about a new way of conceiving justice that has always come across all the words and examples by Father Occhetta. I think this might be a possible way to sum up what Father Occhetta has said. When Father Occhetta talks about justice, he talks about justice as a relationship with the other. And he mentions injustice. He talks about injustice as the rupture of this relationship with the other. So, and it would be nice to start from this conception in the Bible. In any psalm, in any passage of the Bible, you always make reference to this one's own rights and to justice. So there is this recurring terminology in the Bible, and it would be nice to conceive whether this conception of justice as a relationship and injustice as a breakage, as a rupture of this relationship, whether this can be the case in the Bible too, and whether this creates a whole new form of answers in a very creative way. So creativity. Last year we were struck by this new form of creativity when last year we discovered the FBAC, and nobody can escape from love. None of us can forget this sentence. This sentence written on the wall of a prison with barbed wire, talking about a prison without keys, where the keys are given to the very same prisoners. Mr. Ferreira will help us understand what's the secret that enabled this fantastic experience. And I would like to ask him also what is the secret that made it possible for such an unthinkable kind of experience to be accepted, also by institutions. So we're not talking about an avant-garde solution for visionary people, for brave visionary people, but the very same institutions in some states in Brazil looked at this model as something which is very interesting and which is something that can be introduced in their institutional setting and other in the country as well. Before leaving the floor to him, we'll now watch a video.
Sappiamo che
We know that many people oppose a change in the current prison system because they complain about the system. We are here in a lab where furniture is made. These prisoners work every day for at least 6 hours. In this kitchen, we have 3 or 4 prisoners. They prepare food for 170 people. In the common prison system, we receive a lot of mediations. In the traditional system, there are lots of riots, but the situation is different here. You also have families with their children. As you can see, there are no walls. Many prisons work here. There is a vegetable garden, and there you have a workshop where car parts are processed, and even those who were considered to be useless in society, well, still these people can be considered useful here, and that's why they're called recuperando, meaning the prisoner who is being recovered in a way, re-educated. Here we have on the right the door that leads to the area for the recuperando, and on the right the ones who are still in cells with keys. Well, I was condemned to 21 years, 15 years for a murder, and the rest for a robbery. I have 3 children. Today, the relapse in our facilities is less than 10%. The national average is about 80%, and the worldwide percentage, corresponding percentage, is 70%. And the prisoner here costs about 3.5 times less than the traditional system. There is no corruption, there is no violence, no drugs are used in here, no mobile phones are used. The prison system, the jail system is a real industry today. Many organizations and corporations live on the, so to say, misery of this system. So good morning. Good morning, everyone. I would like to greet Marta, Father Occhetta, and Carmen, who are sharing this moment with me. I would like to express my deepest happiness and gratitude, especially to the organizers of the meeting and the APSEC Foundation, who did so much to consolidate already existing APAC facilities, and who have also helped the spread of the APAC system in the world. I came from Brazil the other day, and I left a country which is currently going through deep agony. Brazil is currently going through an unprecedented crisis. It is an economic crisis which actually is characterized by over 13 million unemployed people. 80% of them are young people, aged between 18 and 24 years of age. We are also going through a very deep political crisis, a very deep leadership crisis. And above all, we are going through a crisis in values. Against this background, Brazil is also going through a crisis of its jail system that has been going on for centuries, and which now has 700,000 prisoners living in inhuman conditions. We have jails where the relapse percentage is over 80%, full of violence, controlled by criminal groups. So jails which contribute to worsen the life of people because they are real universities of crime. But I am convinced that this reality of the Brazilian prison system to a lower or greater extent is present also in other countries, especially in Latin America, in Africa, and in Asia. In the midst of this crisis, we have made a successful experience, that of APAC. APAC stands for Association for Protection and Assistance to Those Who've Been Condemned, to prisoners. So associations are non-profit-making institutions whose aim is to recover detainees, protect society, help victims, and promote restorative justice. To reach these goals, we offer the so-called APAC method. It is some kind of a therapy of ours based on 12 basic elements, including community participation, or a recuperando helping another recuperando, then work, education, training, health assistance, legal assistance, assistance to the family, the promotion of human life, volunteering work. And then when these 12 fundamental principles work, and when they are applied harmoniously, well, then they bring about positive results. This is a method based on love, confidence, and discipline. Through the application of this methodology, it is possible to reduce relapse into crime to percentages lower than 15%. We can also drastically reduce costs. There is no violence, there are no riots, no rebellion, there's no rebellion, there are no drugs, and there are no criminal groups. I might even add that APAC are a real revolution of the jail system, and this for the whole world. And I am confident, I'm sure of the fact that this century will be characterized by the APAC experience. Even if in a very simple way, today we are managing 48 APAC facilities in Brazil, hosting over 300,000 recuperandi prisoners. And we have over 80 APAC facilities which are currently being implemented. We are also present and partially apply the same methodology in 23 countries in the world. You might wonder that as APAC was set up in 1982, created by Marietto Bona, well, why, after so many years, the experience is still so timid? And my answer is that this is due to two main reasons. The first reason lies in the fact that the APAC method is not recognized, especially in our country. Unfortunately, positive experiences successful positive experiences are very rarely supported by the media, unfortunately. And furthermore, we are running against the tide. If there is a sector which is a rapidly growing in sector, well, that's the sector of detainees, of prisoners. So if we're looking for support and friends, well, we definitely have many more foes, many more opponents who are against our experience and would like our experience to fail. Allow me to say one thing. Even if we got good results, still APAC is not the solution for crime and violence. The APAC facilities are not the method, the model as is. APAC facilities do not want to replace, do not aim at replacing traditional prisons. But they are definitely a good and feasible alternative, which we are currently offering in Brazil and in other countries. The APAC facilities are 100% a Brazilian experience, but they are not, so to say, owned by Brazil. Like all works of God, the APAC was created and are growing under the cross. And like all works of God, they are at the service of the entire humanity. I'm involved in this process aimed at recovering prisoners, and I've been involved in the project for 24 years. I only did this in my life. I've done anything else. What I did was to try and, in a way, eliminate the dirt and the mud of the prisons so as, in a way, to recover prisons. So, ladies and gentlemen, it is very difficult. It might be very difficult for you to imagine the huge obstacles, the enormous obstacles and the great difficulties that every day we have to face in order not to lose hope, in order to wake up every morning as disciples. Those who actually entered this realm confirmed that we are disciples and we wanted to die as disciples, as eternal apprentices in this field. I still remember the first years in which I was being checked by policemen. I remember how tiresome the travels were. I remember the many nights that I did not sleep, and I remember the many doubts that would haunt me. I remember having tried in over 17 cases brought about before court by the public prosecutor in which I was accused of anything. They did anything against me so that I could be a prisoner myself. But then, thanks to God, I have always been supported. I've always had friends. I've always had people who supported me in these difficult times. For entire months, I was threatened to be killed, and I risked everything, my family, my material assets, or losing the closeness of my people. I renounced everything to fully devote myself to this work, and I am confident that this is a real oasis within a desert of sufferings. I've been investing all my life in this case, and I've been consecrated my freedom in order for prisoners to become free again, because I am convinced, I'm firmly convinced of the fact that God called me to bring about this cause. And even if I had lots of reasons to quit, still, thanks to the Recuperando of APAC, I've discovered that nobody can escape love. I cannot escape love, because God is love. So you asked what the secrets are. You asked me what the secret was. And the secret lies in simple things. Even if the method is based on 12 fundamental elements, I am convinced of the fact that God hides himself in the folds of history, and similarly, he reveals himself in the application of these 12 fundamental elements, one of which is to call each deity by his name, because we know that recovering the human person starts from recovering his name, his history, his dignity. And one secret also lies in the family. One of the secrets lies in promoting the person, treating the newcomers as subjects entitled with rights and having duties, giving them a real human space, giving them gardens, tables in the canteen, so that they can start feeling as persons again, as in the image of God, in the image of a God that did not die, as many think. God is still alive and he's acting in our own history. The secret lies in helping those who come to realize the crime they committed and how difficult it is. Normally, prisoners do not realize. They are not aware of the evil they made. Those who normally commit crimes are sometimes not aware of the evil they create, and equally, similarly, those who do good do not realize what's the extent of the good they do. So we're not aware of the number of people we can reach with our sins and with our good acts, and at the same time we do not know how many people we can reach with the good gestures of good that we can offer the people we meet. When we realize the evil we've made and the suffering we've suffered, of the sufferings made to the families of the victims and society in general, then we help them making a second step. We help them in a way getting rid of the crime. One thing is the person and the other thing is the crime committed by the person. Very often when prisoners look themselves in the mirror, they consider them as rubbish, as someone who are, as people who are not useful for society, for their family, because their person is in a way confused with the crime they've made. And then when we help them make this second additional step, then we help them make a third step. In other words, we help them realize that they are something more and something bigger than the crime they made. That every person is bigger than the blame and than the sin and the crime they made. If the sin we made was big, then the grace of God, the mercy of God is even bigger, and even God's forgiveness is even bigger. In that specific moment, the person starts freeing herself or himself, and the final liberation will occur when these persons are able to make a fourth step. In other words, when through the very difficult process of adults, actually, when their behavior changes and also their mindset changes, and when this step is made, then we help them make an experience, the experience of Ezekiel the prophet, who gets away a heart of stone and replaces it with a heart of flesh. So conversion, changing one's life. In that specific moment, one wants to repair, to put a remedy to the damage made. This morning, unfortunately, we don't have so much time But I could actually offer you so many examples. We also have a book written by Mr. Mario Toboni under the title Sì, la soluzione e non la vittima. You have to be the solution and not the victim. There's plenty of examples in which men and women who committed crime and violence were able to make this additional step forward towards reconciliation with their victims. And I'd like to actually give you another example, that of Marcus Paulus, who committed murder. He killed a man to rob him. So a robbery with a murder. A 22-year-old young man condemned to 25 years. He left a widow and 2 orphans. And then inside the APAC, with lots of efforts, we helped him. We helped him make these additional steps towards reconciliation. And then at the 3rd step, he suffered a very deep pain. He did not know how he could repair the pain he had made. And so he made 2 steps that I would like to consider as steps inspired by God. The first step consisted in the fact that every month he would collect the money obtained from the sale of the crafts products he would produce and then send a basket of goods to his family. He did that for 2 years, every month, to support the widow and the orphans. Only after 2 years, in which he did that anonymously, did the widow realize where the help came from and decided to visit the APAC and meet the prisoner. And I'm grateful to God because I witnessed that encounter, and that was an encounter of forgiveness. I know that forgiveness is at the very essence of the love of God. Also this way, still the prisoner continued being anguished. He had partially repaired the damage made, but there was a victim. I mean, someone had died. Blood was shed. And then one day, during a conversation, a lady asked to talk to the recuperandi of the APAC. This woman had a very close relative, a nephew, who was doing dialysis. He was doing that 3 times a week. And she told about the sufferings of this nephew and asked if there was someone in the group who could donate a kidney. Over 6 recuperandi in the room offered. So 8 volunteered to donate their kidney, and they were then given to hospital. So they did the tests. One of them was Marco Paolo. And it might be incredible, might sound incredible, actually. Only Marcus Paolo was compatible. So Marcus Paolo actually always wanted to tell how he took away life, but then thanks to the grace of God, he had given another life. After this experience, he asked to be baptized. Then he did the first communion, he did confirmation, and I'm his father. Thank you. Thank you, Valdeci. So the histories and the very rich experiences we've listened to today actually deserve no further comments. Allow me just to, in a way, eliminate any possible misunderstandings. This is nothing magical. Nothing happens immediately or with certainty as with a magical potion. What we listen to is not even a format. This is no mechanism that can be easily replicated if we are to obtain very safe outcomes. This is not even a moral recall to forgiveness and mercy. Very often, our heart feels so incapable of forgiving, of feeling mercy, of forgetting things, facts, and the pain that's hurt us. What we've listened to today clearly shows a possible way, a path that we can walk and that can help us experiment in spite of the several sufferings and in spite of the pain we've received, a real human utility and usefulness of preventing for those who are involved to, in a way, remain fixed in a role that they are incapable of getting out of. This is a path that can be walked, but it is to be fully discovered by those who are called upon to walk it. Last summer, I happened to read a sentence that I would like to end with and share with you, because I think it is really enlightening towards our human condition. It talks about other fundamental experiences, but I think it is perfect and very feasible also in looking for justice. It is a sentence by von Balthasar, and it reads as follows. Exactly like the swimmer always has to swim in order not to drown, even if he's become better and better in his ability, in his swimming ability, well, equally, the lover has to live every day in a new and original way, in love, and question love. And similarly, also, the person who knows has to face and pose himself always, every day, the question on the essence of truth without being skeptical, a destructive, skeptical person. So a continuous search, a brave energy, a never-ending path in any aspect of human experience and also in the field of justice. So this is nothing to do with simply listening to this oasis in the desert, simply to abandon traditional justice. This afternoon, we're going to be with Paolo Tosoni, and we're going to listen to equally fascinating experiences of magistrates, Italian magistrates. But what we're called upon to do is to take advantage of that need for justice and constantly question it. We, as swimmers, as lovers, as people who know, who are repository of knowledge, in the constant search for that need, for the desire of justice, led by the experience and the experiments that we've listened to. There's also a written trace. There's this booklet by Father Occhetta and the booklet in the Tenda di Arsi. Carmen will probably sooner or later write a book of hers, and we would like to wholeheartedly thank the meeting, because in any case, every year they give us the chance to have a space in which that gives us a chance to be so enriched in knowledge. Those who would like to support the meeting, they can do it by through fundraising. We also need material support. There are booths called Dona Ora, where every one of us in a spirit of gratitude towards what we've listened to, can give its own contribution. Thanks to all the speakers for what they told us.